creating beyond calculation, beyond politics, and beyond the big two. Welcome, Silverliners, to the wonderful world of Wednesday Wham. I'm your host, Dean Zachary, and we're joined tonight by Barbara J. Kailberg, the Empress of the Inks, Rob Davis, the Paragon of Pencils, the Superior Skeptic, also known as Aaron the Contrarian Humphreys. One of the Wizards of Wordplay is here tonight.
That's me.
Lord Boyle.
The other one's coming.
We're missing Scott. Is he on the way? Well,
Yeah, he'll be here eventually.
That's good. That's good. We have an interesting topic tonight that even off camera we had started the discussion. It's a compelling one tonight. We're going to talk about epic fantasy. We're going to talk a little bit about defining the terms of what that means exactly and how narrow we want to keep those terms in order to limit our discussion, or whether we want to open it up to a wider range of category. Just to get started, one of the questions that occurred to me to come up with this topic was quite simply that we had quite a few successful epic fantasy franchises in the last 20 years or plus. We had Lord of the Rings, which then spawned The Hobbit, then Rings of Power. We have Game of Thrones. We have now Wheel of Time, among others. And in that sort of genre of swords and capes and medieval magic and so on, we have such a successful line of movies and television. Where are the epic fantasy comics, and why aren't more of them selling in the top 10 or 20 or even the top 50? Some of the discussion pre-show led to the suggestion that there were some epic fantasies that were selling well and that we may not have even considered as epic fantasies. I want to start with our Empress of the Inks. Barb, you brought up some really good category idea openings there. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, when I think of epic fantasy, obviously the first thing I'm gonna think of is Robert Jordan's books or Tad Williams' books or the Lord of the Ring books, where you've got the sword and the sorcery.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But if you boil it down to what it is, you have an epic fantasy is a heroic, the hero's journey on a quest between right and wrong or good and evil.
Sure.
So does it necessarily have to be in a medieval setting, with the capes and the horses and the
sure.
Why can't it? It's been said that Sandman. This is my Sandman figurine.
Pretty cool.
Sandman has been considered to be an epic fantasy. It's got magic.
Sure.
It's got a long-running series, so it will be considered epic.
Mm-hmm.
Our hero is on a journey, and it has also spawned, the successful Sandman series. It just got renewed. Yay!
Yay!
That's an interesting point. I like that you bring that up. The parameters that I set up were primarily specifically to get to the core reason as to why the fantasy that you described that we would consider as Tolkien and medieval fantasy, why don't those comics succeed as well as the movies and television do? So I do appreciate that wider category definition. But that is where kind of I wanted to go, and then we can expand from there. I want to say hi to Cool Gamer, who says hello to everybody, and Calculus says buena sera to all of us, and back at you, Calculus. So that being said, I like the idea of going wide with it. The problem with that is it kind of takes us off the rails to a different discussion. I really do want to get to the core root, because maybe we can figure out how to get some epic fantasy books in the top 20. Rob, you brought up something earlier, pre-show, about some books that could be considered epic fantasy that sometimes do occur in those top rankings. What did you bring up earlier?
Well, Warlord at DC was pretty popular there for a while, and now I'm blanking on what I brought up earlier. Don't you hate that?
Curtis Morgan, Warlord.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was
he was
it was
that was a
Warlord
very popular comic for a
and
little
Conan.
while.
You also brought up
Conan was the
Conan.
big one that I brought up. Yeah,
Yes,
which
yes,
led me to Warlord and some of the
Warlord
other
and so
similar
on.
things. Yeah.
Welcome, co-host and one of the Wizards of Wordplay, Scott Wakefield.
Good evening, everybody.
Better late than never, my
Evening.
friend.
I'm very happy to be here. Running a little behind,
That's
and
all
if
right.
I just suddenly disappear, my computer will work great for months at a time, and then it'll decide that it's tired. It's just give me a break for the day, and I'll be clickety clacking along, and then
Wow,
And poof, there he goes.
and then
just gone. Huh?
I have no idea. So today it's been doing that.
Mhm.
I've purged it of files and done the
And rebooted.
safe mode and reboot.
Cleared
and
your browser history.
The
As long as you
PRAM.
rebooted,
Which
cleared
is
the
my
history.
answer to every problem with a computer.
Yeah, turn it
Reboot,
off.
man.
It wants.
Reboot.
It's forcing me because it just done, and so it restarts itself, and it says your computer was restarted because of a problem. You want to report? No, I'm going to ignore it because there's no point in reporting that 1,000 times. But
So anyway, yeah. I brought up, what I was in the middle of when he popped in, like
rudely interrupted.
I timed it. I was watching.
Yes, I did bring up Conan because that popped into my mind. That's essentially an epic story because he's got. There's even the original Robert E. Howard stuff. He actually had a story because he starts out as a lowly thief and ends up a king by the end of his sojourn. So yeah, he's got what Barbara's talking about. He's got that hero's journey.
Sure.
So, and it also deals with magic, and it deals with swords, and it, and all those elements that we were talking about earlier. So, I would say that Conan, which it has been a big seller for several different companies now, and I don't know if he ever made the top 20. I'd have to go back and look, but I bet he has it at one time or another, at least broken into the top 100. If not the top 20.
Of course.
So,
that's an excellent example, Rob. That's an excellent example of something that doesn't occur to us off the top of our head when we speak of epic fantasy, but it certainly fits the category. I wanted to also look at Calculus's question. Would the Realm from Arrow Comics be considered an epic?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I would say.
If I remember what little I remember of Realm from Arrow, but yeah, I believe you're right.
Yeah,
I believe that would too. Of course, that didn't crack the top 20, but
right.
So the question tonight is, what would it take for it to crack the top 20?
What would it take? What impact or what component of the epic fantasy that we are narrowing the discussion to this evening, the Tolkien-esque, the Wheel of Time, even Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis fits into this idea of an alternate world that is similar to our historical world in terms of its medieval elements. What would it take for those stories to match their equivalents in movies and television in success? What are your thoughts on that, Scott? Since you arrived late, we're going to put you on the spot and in the spotlight.
Oh my! So can you say that once more? What would it take for them to match? What's that?
The financial success and popularity of their movies and television counterparts. In other
comic
words,
book form or book form?
Comic book form, in terms of
why
aren't they in the top? I mean, because one would think, well, look at Game of Thrones, it's a wild success. Look at Lord of the Rings, wild success. Look at even Wheel of Time, it's a wild. And then there's no equivalent.
I've been pondering that, and I don't think I'm wise enough to come up with a good answer because I can't figure out. First of all, I mean, there is a disparity between popularity of
course,
movies,
of course,
books, and comic books. And we get that, and that's something we talk about a lot. Like, how do you get more people to read comics and how it ebbs and flows? I wonder in the fantasy genre if we are ebbing away. It seems like, and I haven't done tons of market research, but this is all my little bit of anecdotal watching. It seems like we're ebbing away from superheroes. Just like westerns have their time, sci-fi has its time, superheroes has its time, vampires have their time, zombies.
Sure.
I wonder if fantasies are, because Lord of the Rings was 20 years ago. The movies, that is,
Sure.
So as
Right.
far as pop culture prominence, this might be the time for the comic book world to jump on that and get. And I really think it could visually, because you are limited with your depth of prose that you can't get with like a Tolkien novel in comic book form.
The Game of Thrones is
Right.
wildly popular.
Right,
Wildly
right.
popular.
But in the comic
What up,
book
Charles?
form, in the comic book form, you could. I mean, the art would need to be incredible. That's my thing with the fantasy world. I think
I think you're right.
can't-
I think you're right. I think that's what it would take.
and it's not buildings and straight lines. I would feel something I'd gravitate toward would be that classic early Tolkien illustrations.
Sure.
And I don't know artists' names, but even the
Alan Lee, Howard Pyle, the Brandywine illustrators.
Yes, yep. And even getting into the 70s, the Hildebrandt, the guy Tim Hildebrandt did the other posters
on
and
the
stuff.
calendars.
The Hildebrandt brothers.
Yeah, absolutely. Calculus says, I feel like some fantasy readers look down their nose at fantasy comics. Interesting that
it could be a little highbrow where they're with the original.
There's a little snobbery among the literati and the shall we say, I don't know, the extended pinky tea drinking crowd that may look down at such, sullying the content with something such as a comic book. However, some of the classics that have been made into comics did okay. There was a line in the 90s called Classics Illustrated, where some of our classics from our classic writers like, anything from Treasure Island through 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea to all of the Time Machine were all adapted. And I think the Hobbit was even done as a graphic novel. To my knowledge, The Lord of the Rings has not. I don't think the Tolkien estate has sold the rights to a graphic novel adaptation, and probably because they would want approval, because the material has been so twisted into a pretzel by so many different interpretations. They'd want something true to the content, I would imagine.
Do you think that if it was done in a fancy graphic novel type of format like Telos was, that it would be more acceptable
totally.
to the stars?
And I think Barb on that same line, I would think if we could keep, I feel like whenever you adapt something, there's almost always a dumbing down of it.
Sure.
And if it's adapted for television or if it's adapted for a movie, it's always trimmed down. So yeah, if you're really invested in fill in the blank fantasy novel series, and then they trim it down, you're gonna wonder, well, what parts did they chop out? What's been ruined? I feel like there'd need to be a really good job done of it. Like, if someone could really invest the time and energy to making really not missing anything, and that's tough. That's budget wise. Wow, you have 500-600 pages of paper,
right,
to tell a story. How many comic books would it take?
How many comic
books? Lord of the Rings. Wow,
you have to condense it.
It seems like to me that graphic novels seem to be more acceptable to the literati than floppies.
The graphic. So okay. So let's.
It seems like a better investment.
It's a better investment. Let's review here. We would think that number one, graphic novels may be accepted more for adaptations of literary epic fantasy. What about if the source material was original? Let's say someone just wanted to do the style of Wheel of Time, Game of Thrones, Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, the style, but not necessarily that exact content. And I have some ideas there on the challenges of that. The first one that comes to mind would be there's a lot of front end work to create an epic fantasy. Anyone who's done any scholarly study of Tolkien understands that he was a professor of language at Oxford. So he wanted to create a very rich and well thought out mythology for the ancient prehistoric history, mythical and fictional, of ancient Europe. Western Europe, excuse me, that would be a counterpart to the Eastern European Greco-Roman mythology, and that's kind of what his thesis was in beginning. That so here we have a man who's going to develop the languages of the people. I mean, he's going to go granular with this, right? He's not just going to go, well, there's some elves, there's some dwarves, and then some of them went bad, and then no, he's going to like give you their language. He invented several languages based on the hierarchy of the elves and how ancient they were, etc., etc., and even along the lines of anyone who's traveled to Europe knows there's a dozen names for the same place. We don't have that here, right? Our country's so young. We don't have, we're 250 years old. We don't,
Well, in some cases we have two names because of Native Americans, but yeah.
Certainly two. But you go to Europe and I mean, there's
New Amsterdam. And
there's half a dozen names for the same place.
Yeah.
And so Tolkien even addressed that in his granular level of mythology. He goes and says, the elves knew it as this, and the men knew it as this, and the ancient elves, of course, called it this. So again, he's been knocked for that, but so has Anne Rice. So go figure. But that being said, you have this rich world to create. So there's a lot of front end work if you're gonna do a rich epic fantasy. That may be part of the reason not many of them are done. It's easier to just go, hey, it's set in New York City, right? So everything's already done for you, and you just look it up and start drawing it. That's part of it. The other part of it is that this is the reason that Superman is hard to write also, oddly enough. The other reason I think it's difficult, when you do a very broad brush approach to good and evil, it turns a lot of people, Aaron the Contrarian, off, because they say, it's been done, how many times can you do good and evil, good wins, blah, blah, blah.
It's
but
boring.
The challenge of making that interesting, right? Like, you can do it. It just takes a lot more work than subverting the traditions and doing something totally new, which you can also do and still address the good and evil struggle. So I'll stop pontificating now and throw it to Aaron. Aaron, what are your thoughts on, why isn't there like an equivalent Game of Thrones comic that's selling, just like crazy? What's the problem here? Why isn't it happening?
Well, Game of Thrones doesn't deal with good and evil. Conan didn't deal with good and evil, and I would even challenge Rob.
Well, yes and no.
I've read enough Conan. It doesn't. I don't know. Conan deals with survival.
Mm-hmm.
There's a huge difference to me. I would also challenge the hero's journey. Conan is not a hero. He never has been. That's why I like him. He's a survivor. And so I think that is one of the strengths of fantasy. Is fantasy can write more nuanced characters sometimes. Superheroes, what does a superhero do to fight crime? If the superhero doesn't fight crime, then he's not a superhero, right?
No, I don't know.
Well, not always. Not always. Sometimes it's a broader definition of good and evil.
You can challenge a superhero, but that's the one thing that I always like. Elric was very
right. Elric is more.
Conan. Yeah.
We might as well use D&D.
Conan's an anti-hero.
He's lawful neutral. No, he's chaotic neutral. Is that what he is? If you throw that out there. His alignment is not necessarily along the spectrum of good and evil, right? Where he's in the middle. Conan, right. I would say, is a survivor, like you said. He's
more in the middle stuff, yeah. That's what I like, because they're more just like people existing in this world. Sure. I don't necessarily think you have to do a lot of world building. I think to a degree maybe, but I think you can unveil the world as you make up the story. I don't think you have to sit there and write volumes and volumes of crap on your world to just put them in it. I think I did my Gollins, because the second part of my Gollins is very fantasy. The first part is fantasy too. The whole thing is a fantasy base. I didn't do any world building.
Yeah,
I did it as I went along.
You imply it,
though.
Yeah, so the saturation level of the world building, that's an issue. I think up to the discretion of the creator. They won't go as deep as they want to go.
There's just not. I'll give you the information you need to know. Beyond that, you just don't need to know that. So there's no reason to put it in the context of the story. So Gollins is a fantasy story. It's a very different fantasy story. And my story obviously does not deal with good and evil.
Right.
Far from it. If anyone here has read the whole thing, it goes far from it.
It's a personal story. It's an inner character struggle.
It's a character building. Yeah.
Yeah. Calculus says if you can consider Bone an epic fantasy, it has to be one of the highest selling. He's right. Calculus, good call on that.
I had this on my stack of things to consider as an epic fantasy. This one was probably one of the highest selling ones, but if you're talking longevity, this one's been going for 44 years now.
Yeah. Well, they just finished it, didn't they? Didn't they finish it finally?
No, they're still, it got delayed because of COVID. So they're still doing the next quest. But yeah, this has been 44 years now. That's probably the longest running and most well known. Hey,
as far as comic books,
as far
original
as
comic book fantasy properties, I would probably agree. ElfQuest is probably the most well known. I'm trying to think of any others because I used to read ElfQuest.
Would you consider Spawn a superhero? I guess Spawn would be considered a superhero, even though he's not really a superhero.
Yeah,
kind of dark fantasy, right? I mean, is it?
Yeah.
It's through a lot of worlds.
Yeah,
so
you can even consider Usagi Yojimbo.
Yes,
I was going to say, yep.
Sure, absolutely.
And he is I would say veers more towards the good, but he's also more of a survivor.
Right. Immortal Rising comic book says, hail, Immortal. And Baldwin says, have they made a comic imagining a future where the sun stops coming up? Nothing. 30 Days of Night is the only one. No, more like a Walking Dead style tale of survival. Again, 30 Days of Night. Calculus says, no, now it's ElfQuest in space.
I know, yeah.
Okay, all right. So, interesting.
I think stuff like Game of Thrones and stuff is not in there. I know this sounds stupid. You can't. Maybe there's not enough gore and nudity in the comics or whatever. I watched half of the first season of Game of Thrones and it became the sex violence show. I use other words for that, but it got so ridiculous that it was like.
Yeah.
It was funny because it was like, well, we're going to bore you with these politics, but she's naked, right? So you'll pay attention.
That's what's all good, right?
We'll throw a little incest in there just to spice it up a bit.
I know. That became ridiculous.
It did. I thought it was licentious and overly gratuitous in terms of its use of sex and violence.
Prurient. Yeah.
Prurient. Oh, I love that word. Thank you, Rob.
That's all right. I got that when I did Scimitar. So,
dude,
chalk one up for Rob.
But see,
The Witcher is also. The Witcher, and The Witcher does have comic books.
Yes,
does it really?
Oh yeah. Dark Horse publishes Witcher comics.
Oh.
Was it done first as a comic or was it
a novel?
It was a book.
It was
the
a
Witcher
series.
was a book series from Poland.
That's Poland. That's right.
Yeah, good luck pronouncing his name.
Baldwin asked the question to you, Rob. What is this man inking in the bottom right?
Your mom, I would assume.
What? Wow, that's going to make friends. Now you know why he's there in the contrarian. Baldwin.
That's what I always say to anybody who always asks me.
Oh, yeah, I know. That's very cool, Rob.
Mom is beautiful.
The word balloon will be "Face It, Tiger."
You just won the jackpot. I love it.
It is his mom. Okay, so
isn't that
is that Mary Jane?
You lucked out on that one, Aaron.
I don't want to say anything bad, but your mom's really hot.
No, Immortal says Spawn, reluctant dark hero. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. My mom would
Spawn
appreciate
worked better when he was a horror comic. I never got the superhero aspect of Spawn. Even when I remember started reading it, I was like, he's from hell, and they gave him a cape and what? Like what? I didn't get why he looked like that.
What's happening? Yeah.
So
it's just it's the whole McFarlane thing. If it's cool, I'm going to put it on.
Cool, man.
It looks cool. Let's go.
It's awesome. Rory, well, we haven't heard from you, my friend. What's talk to us on your thoughts on some of these issues that we've stumbled into tonight?
Well, I think the defining of terms is super important. When I think fantasy, of course, you think like medieval Tolkien-esque. There's a high fantasy and a low fantasy, so somewhere in between there, where in the high magic is occurring often. In the low, it's like not very often at all. It's super either taboo or just so rare you don't see it very often.
Uh-huh.
So somewhere in between.
Fafford the Barbarian type thing.
Yeah.
I haven't read that.
What was it? Who was his partner? It was Fafnir and
the Gray Mouse.
And the Gray
Mouser.
Yeah, the Gray Mouse.
Yeah.
And I would have to say, if we're going to call something an epic, is it an epic as in like it's a massive, amazing story, or an epic in the literary style where you come into the middle of the story and then the hero dies at the end? Because literarily, that's an epic. That's Beowulf.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So it has to have fantastical sequences or themes to it.
Yes.
It has to be in the past. It's got to be ancient. Because I mean, Steam Patriots could be fantasy. I mean, we're faux fiction.
But I mean, anybody could argue that Star Wars is an epic fantasy.
Of course, that's
sure.
So
I
mean, you could do it in the past, but I mean, technically, Star Wars is supposed to be in the past from the opening credits, right? So there you go. Yeah, a long time ago, right?
So it's relevant.
In a galaxy far, far away.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but that's precisely why I wanted to keep it sort of Tolkien-esque, because it really baffles me why these movies and TV shows are so hugely, I mean, just insanely popular. And even we discussed this a little bit pre-show. When you go to comic conventions, you see these people like dressed up and they're, what's that? Oh, that's World of Warcraft. You know, what's that? Oh, that's Magic the Gathering. It's like, but this is a Comic-Con. I mean, there's no none of them are well, actually, Magic does have a comic. It's certainly not anywhere near the top 10 or 20 that I'm aware of, but they do have a comic adaptation. So the question then still becomes, what would it take? We'll ask it this way. What would it take to put the medieval fantasy as we understand it in the Tolkien framework, or even the Game of Thrones framework, minus the licentious R-rated material?
More D&D.
What would it take to make that happen? Would it just be a creative team that really blends everything that Rory just described with this appealing character journey, and with some of the things Aaron described, where you have characters that are struggling with their own inner demons, not so much the outer battle of the broad brush good and evil, but
I mean, even Tolkien did that. I mean, Boromir struggled
absolutely,
and stuff. So I mean, they weren't all heroes even in the
no,
Fellowship,
they're not. No,
What
which I
would it
think is
take? It would take a good story,
yes,
fantastic art,
yes,
and a hell of a public campaign. I mean, you bring in a hot artist that everybody knows.
Yeah,
boom.
I think
do a huge Kickstarter campaign and a lot of PR, and you'd have it.
But how do you get out to the people who don't know who these artists are? How do you get those new people in?
I think
like the artist's name means nothing.
You get the good art. Good art in the comic book world it draws you in. You see it, and really, I mean, a cover is huge. They're going to judge the book by its cover, and that there's statistics to that.
You get good art, you get good story, you get good PR, and guess who comes knocking?
So draw them in with a Dean Zachary cover, but you get the artist on the inside.
Hey, wow, well, there's an idea for you. I think y'all hit on something there, because we need to do a fantasy comic now. No.
Yeah. I'll do it.
I'll do it. On their
Rory Warbeard with a Bedwell.
But in terms of the future of comics, it wouldn't hurt for any aspiring creators out there, both within the Silverline family and outside, to seriously consider working hard at that to bring it back. And if you wanted to stay within the parameters that we've set, great. If you want to expand into other parameters, that's great too. But I would love to see some people take that old-fashioned D&D Tolkien environment and really tell a fantastic story with great art.
Tell a good story, not okay. I haven't seen the next the new D&D movie. Looks clever. Looks clever. It looks fun, and that's great. It's fun. I don't think that sort of story would have staying power, but it's a movie. It's 2 hours of fun. If you had that D&D world, and we talked about it last time, I think, about the novels, the D&D novels, the Dragonlance books. Those came from a D&D adventure that it was a great story and a great characters. And I still, you got Tanis and oh my gosh, I'm going to forget their names.
But DC did Dragonlance for a while.
They did do Dragonlance.
There's still Dragonlance. I think there's still Dragonlance books out, but I might be mistaken. I know they did the old.
The Dragonlance name went away, I think, but I could be wrong. I'm because when it went from TSR to Wizards of the Coast and so forth.
Yeah, some things did change.
But the same idea of what Barb's saying, a deeper story than kind of the hokey archetypes of a fighter, wizard, mage, a dwarf with an axe, and make it
stereotypical.
If he's got an axe, make him.
He must have Scottish accent.
They've almost become caricatures at this point,
right? And it's overdone, and the Tolkien stereotypical characters are all in every video game and every every video game you can pick from the scantily clad woman, the muscular man with a sword, or the dwarf with an axe, and those are your choices.
And your mage, don't forget
your robe-clad mage,
or cleric.
Get Raistlin the mage.
But make it much deeper. I think that's what it would need, and it would have to appeal. I think it would have to appeal for the staying power. I think it would have to appeal to an audience that wants a little bit more of a deeper comic. If we're talking big,
I think so.
Big world, not just hack and slash.
Well, I think also be imaginative. I'm not sure if I'd even do the Tolkien stuff. I mean, the big game this week is God of War. That's based on history, but that's imaginative. I think if you're going to do fantasy, use imagination. I mean, you could take Tolkien, but you're almost dividing a fan base. In other words, this is the same reason why I used to have friends like, I'm going to make this space like fantasy, and it's going to be like Star Wars, and all the fans are going to keep running. And their flaw in thinking is that these Star Wars fans are going to leave Star Wars and come to your stuff. They're not going to. They're going to spend their money on Star Wars. So this is like, to me, like making a Tolkien book is great, but if you're trying to get Tolkien fans, they don't care. They're just going to spend their money on Tolkien stuff. So I think it behooves you, if it's fantasy, do something that you've never seen or done before. And again, that's the magic question. Again, why do these TV
good story?
But why do these TV shows, like Dean says, so popular? Because they're based on these book series that have been around since the 50s. I mean, they've had built-in generational like fan bases that are watching these things. You don't see many original fantasy series coming on. They're all based on something else. That would to me would be the test. Make your own original fantasy series and see if it catches.
When you said be imaginative, that's the key. And how do you be imaginative?
It's really it's tough to get away.
You set parameters. You set rules of your world that you do not break, because it forces you to be more imaginative in that context. It doesn't have to be the same rules as Tolkien's world or the World of Warcraft or all that. Shift it.
Yeah,
make it different rules. Own stuff.
In other words, make a world of comic that you can only get in the comic. I mean, Battle Chasers is a classic one. Now, Battle Chasers is heavily influenced by Final Fantasy. Because Joe Matt is playing a lot of that. But again, he mixed American medieval fantasy stuff with this sort of sci-fi stuff, and it worked. I mean, was it the art? Maybe, but I think he created a compelling world too. But he was imaginative, and I think you can get imagine. I mean, one of my favorite films of all time is Never Ending Story, and that's not based on Tolkien or anything. That's completely, So I think keep out the stretch of imagination. Legend, right? I think you can push it, and I think that's. I mean, especially again, I've said this many times. I'm always amazed that people will get a comic book and a blank page and then draw the same thing they've seen over and over and over again. And it's like, you can make anything you want, like really push the boundaries. Don't draw what's safe. I mean, because people talk about, video games don't take chances because of the $1 billion industry. Yeah, comic books don't have any money. You're not losing, you're not losing anything to do your own stuff.
Yeah. In other words, don't copy to the point of where everything's a copy of something successful.
Right. I'm doing this story I'm working on now. I have the first issue written, but I'm trying to find time to do it. Is that Nock the Barbarian, which is short for Nocturnal. And all I did was take a barbarian and mix him in a world of Halloween.
That's really
That's cool. It. I just smushed it. And as simple as that. It doesn't have to be these grand, multifaceted. Just take two things you like and smush them together. You'd be amazed what crap.
Well, yeah, I've got a whole world too that I'd love to write too. It's called Urban Myth. It's taking all the the fantasy creatures and throwing them into modern times, and they're in the police department, and they're
do it.
Yeah, well, it's a matter of time, and
you've got tons of time. There's nothing else going on. You're retired. Kidding, of course.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. Immortal says it's the PR problem. That's part of it for any new original concept is getting it out there, getting enough PR. Calculus says a comic about a were-turtle. That's curious. Kind of like that.
Well, that's a mashup I can get behind.
I have a
about
a rising hot indie artist hoping to fill a need. Hey, there you go. You're getting there. Did anybody see Cool World? That was kind of awesome. Calculus. Don't forget skinny guy who cries after every battle with a bow. Wow, there's some heckling going on there. You need to set a hard magic system. Yeah,
don't keep pushing it like Star Wars with the Force or surprising people with what it can, it can do this now. What?
Set some concrete rules and
solves
stick to them.
every problem.
Yeah.
I actually would argue against the hard magic system. My Godlings has magic in it, but when you get right down to it, the magic they're doing is just controlling molecules and controlling matter on a molecular level. That's it. It looks like magic to you because you don't know it. I don't know. I mean, I know there's hard magic systems. I don't know. To me, I almost argue that fantasy doesn't even need a magic system.
True.
No, not necessarily.
No,
I think he's saying if you're going to have it, stick to something and don't make your magic
because I mean, like that show Never Ending Story. I mean, there was not really magic in that story. I mean, he was no magician. I mean, you could argue the magic is subtle, but there was no hard-based magic. I mean, there's no wizards or whatever.
Let me bring this up. Did it bother anyone that, like in the new Doctor Strange movie, you didn't know the magic was so powerful and so reality-altering that it becomes like when the volume is turned up to distortion, it was just ridiculous. Like anything could happen, so anything did happen. So where's the tension? Where's the drama? Where's the risk to your
when the magic becomes a Deo ex machina, then it's not fun anymore because it can do anything.
It can do anything. So then
we're in this horrible situation.
Yeah.
Ding, ding, ding.
And if I think really, if I really bear down, I can do it, and it solves the problem. Yep. Yeah.
Well,
we need a montage.
Yeah, and we need a montage. And I relate this back to one of the best moments of Fellowship of the Ring is when Gandalf is having trouble opening the gates of Moria, right? So it's hard for him to do, and even Boromir's like going, well, if you're going to bring a wizard, at least bring one that can do something. And standing around,
team of wizards,
waiting for this guy to open this door, and he was just opening a door. It wasn't like Doctor Strange. Oh, I'm going to alter reality and open a portal. I'm going to just open
he couldn't. He could have just blasted it open, but
no.
I almost
the simplicity of that puzzle. What it does is it brings everything down to a personal level, which is why he spent so much time with the hobbits in Hobbiton, right? Mm-hmm. It's like if you're in the Shire that long, a lot of people go, it's boring. Let's get out of the Shire. Okay, I get that. But on the other side of that argument, you need to stay in the Shire because you need to understand how all this epic stuff affects the average people who are just trying to farm and live and live out their lives without too much trouble, and how that's going to affect these little people. And, that was the core of the Jackson adaptation that I liked, was even the smallest person can make the biggest difference. That was more the doorway of messaging that the Jackson screenwriters went for. It was about being a small person doing a big thing. Rather than, hey, it's an evil wizard against a good wizard, and it's da-da-da. They didn't do that. And
the funny thing is, even in like Conan, I've always liked magic systems. I mean, Conan's not a magician. Lord of the Rings, even, and he did this a little bit in Lord of the Rings, where you don't really technically know how the magic system works. Conan always liked that when he encountered magical things, he didn't really know what was working and even how it worked or what he encountered. There was that sense of mystery that there's certain things that are never going to be explained. I like that. Yeah, I don't think you need to explain a magic system like a D&D rule. Like, okay, if he says this, I mean, I think if it's a purpose of your story, if your main character is a wizard, yes, I can see
But
having a
has
hard magic
limitations.
system and explaining that. But if he's encountering magic and not a magician, you can keep it mysterious. I think it actually works better that way.
It does work better. I want to congratulate Hart Fisher with the best comment we've ever read. You guys are right.
Yes,
Thank you.
correct.
Yes, we are.
I
You are
agree
correct.
wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
Calculus says, I don't care how small the room is, I cast a fireball. Isn't that
Yeah,
true,
wait,
right?
what's the area of effect?
Who's
Yep.
standing in the
Yeah.
front? Who's in the front? Let's see. Hart says, I hate the way magic is portrayed in the Marvel films.
Yeah.
I agree,
Yeah.
Hart. I hate the way it's portrayed too. It's just whatever happened, whatever needs to happen, we're doing it.
We can
right
make
now.
that happen.
I mean, didn't Doctor Strange actually have a limit? Didn't they explain his magic more in the comics? I never read more.
Yeah. Well, I didn't read a lot of it, but my understanding of his magic was it was limited. It took a toll on him. And also there was always a huge payment made for the larger the spell, the bigger the payment. You know, he
well, that's what I like I said, I mean, I've talked many a time. I'm not a fan of the Marvel films at all. So I mean, I just think
we could bash Marvel for the whole rest of the show.
But I do think Marvel is more. I mean, I can see what the the bean counters are basically thinking. They're like, do you need to think about this magic system? Like, no, more crap, more pizzazz, more visual effects. Who cares?
More fireworks show.
Right. It's long as you just keep throwing stuff in their face, they're not gonna. This is why so many people come out of Marvel films like, what happened? I don't,
wait. As long as you do as much fireworks as possible, and wait for it, use a pop song to celebrate the crowd, ladies and gentlemen.
And now you got to give a wink and a nod to every incarnation of anybody that was ever mentioned. Which, in fact, I'm surprised they didn't throw in a David Hasselhoff, Nick Fury somewhere. They missed that.
I know, right?
Maybe they couldn't get
missed opportunity.
Yeah, there's so many, but Aaron,
don't worry when they get time travel in there.
Iron Man movie. I was breathless for 2 hours because Iron Man is my guy, and then kind of from there, it did this through some of Endgame, and then magic and then time travel.
I mean,
I can't keep up.
Yeah, I didn't even watch the TV. I think I watched WandaVision. That's the only TV series I watched of theirs, and they keep having more and more of them.
Loki.
Loki, everybody says is good, but I know there's a part of me that's like, I just rather could read the comics. I don't know. I mean, there's a part of me I'm like, do I really need to see Disney just like Fury meets Baywatch,
cash in. Ka-ching, ka-ching.
Wow, ka-ching.
Have instead of the Coast Guard helicopter lower down, have a shield helicopter coming down.
I still, and they've even talked about this. I always find it so funny that
David Hasselhoff with a cigar.
With a cigar, not in the comic book, no.
And in
Marvel.
his swimsuit, in a red swimsuit.
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
Well, I still can't figure out in the Marvel, and I've talked about this many times, why S.H.I.E.L.D. is so advanced in technology. Like, their technology looks like magic. So does Iron Man's technology. And the rest of the world has none of this.
Nothing.
It doesn't bleed into it.
Right.
Like, if somebody invented the ability to do nanotechnology in the scale of Iron Man, that would revolutionize the world. The fact that it doesn't just makes Iron Man the biggest beep in the world to me because he's hoarding it.
And S.H.I.E.L.D.
It's supposed to be because it's so expensive. It can't.
Wasn't that the Michael Keaton right in there for Vulture?
What? Oh yeah.
About him.
It was like all the like leftover technology from battles they would go grab.
Yes, that's right.
The reasoning behind Iron Man was that it was so expensive that it was cost prohibitive to be the common usage.
And if he has it, then he's not special anymore, and he can't.
Yeah, the nanotechnology. I like the Iron Man, and like you, Scott, in the beginning, where the iron suit was more of.
I like that.
It had a little bit of limits, but now the movie when it's just like
doing
anything. I'm just like, okay, it's not even a suit; it's a second skin.
Right.
It does everything.
Yeah.
Again, we come back to believability and limitations.
The Hobbit movies. Oh my goodness, verisimilitude and just basic physics. Don't even. And I don't like storytelling. I don't like. I've mentioned this before. I don't like when our heroes are lucky. There is a bit of you can have an element of luck. It's fine. I don't like when they get out of a fire through no act of their own. But then, like the Hobbit movies, they needed to fill. They turned a 200 and some page book into 9 hours, and so we get to watch 13 dwarves and the lucky hobbit tumble and fall and roll and duck and swing.
Yeah,
and
I got
just
the same thing out of the original Lord of the Rings. Like,
there were moments.
there were moments like I remember like when they were killing orcs. Like they kept sending the orcs and the Orgai, and like even I remember them coming out in the bridge in the battle of like the wall, the Great Wall. I can't remember, and they're like just kicking the orcs' butt. Like I'm like, these are the most ineffective soldiers I've ever seen. Like these guys come up scary, and they don't even dent it. Like I was actually waiting, like, do our heroes ever
not
get
qualitative?
hurt?
Well, the orc. They're waiting now. Now, to be fair, the orcs that you see in Moria are not nearly as scary and deadly as the Uruk-hai, the genetic.
Well, that's what they sent against in the second movie against the city, right? It was the Uruk-hai.
It was,
and they failed just as miserably.
Well,
they had
Helm's Deep, yeah.
They had their Olympic runner running in there.
It was raining. It was muddy. They were tired.
It was just there was a part of me that
all day.
I enjoyed the Lord of the Rings. I really enjoyed this movies, and I even enjoyed the Hobbits. People were like, how can you like the Hobbits? Like, I just think of them as stupid D&D adventures.
Sure,
I don't care.
Sure.
And
that's all
because
that's
I didn't really care. I mean, they got the initial story of the Hobbit, and then you get to see lots of monsters and creatures and stuff. So it never really bothered me. I enjoyed it for what they were. But I thought Lord of the Rings just got just ridiculous. It's like you're talking about luck, and I'm just like, dude, these guys would take on armies of these Orgai or whatever, and I'm just like, I could just see Saruman going like, maybe I need to rethink this strategy. I mean, they became the equivalent of fantasy stormtroopers.
Well,
yeah,
the orcs were essentially cannon fodder.
Yeah, they wanted numbers.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, it was
them
the
with
numbers. I mean, you'd see that huge
field
full of. Then
usually in real war, that actually works.
You got the tanks that they put out there, but you've got all those troops. Those are cannon fodder.
Oh, I know.
You had ballista. You had
they're
siege
just to
tower.
slowly work. Slowly lower the numbers of the
I don't
men.
know. There was just
so that they can
I think.
overcome them.
Well, remember,
somebody needed to at least lose an arm or a leg or a finger. There had to be somebody cut. Like I wanted to see at least
one of the
Aragorn with a Band-Aid on his face. I mean, the guy fell off a cliff with his horse and whatever. I'll just walk it off.
Yeah,
King Theoden
he had a rough
King
go.
Theoden died trying to fight the Nazgul.
Boromir was the only one that got hurt, and how many times did it take to kill Boromir?
He does take.
Frodo gets stabbed.
Boromir got axed, and got shot up with arrows. So we lost it. We lost our hero. The first movie is the best. What
4 or 5 of the dwarves died in the Battle of Five Armies, right?
Yeah, we lost a lot of the dwarves. Yeah.
They just needed some sort of epic funeral. Yeah, dwarves or whatever. Yeah, I know. None of them died. It just got to the point where I'm like, I have thousands of troops. Yeah, I got a dwarf with a hammer.
Yeah, the
guy's like, well,
Legolas hits everything he fires at. Legolas can do acrobatics. Legolas can do
and run.
It got a little
falling stones.
I know.
Yeah,
to me, which that never bothered me because he was able to walk on snow.
Well,
he was able to walk on snow, so I didn't see why he couldn't run up stones. So I'm like, that didn't bother me.
He's a natural sprinter.
Good point.
Yeah. So I mean, there were so many things they did with the little elf boy, which always made it so funny because if he's so light, like is his bones hollow, and can he fly? Maybe he's walking on snow because it's magic.
No, that was that's a magic thing. Elves.
Okay.
Elves are almost
a racial trait.
In their presence.
Racial trait.
That's a +5 to.
Yeah, he's got a +5.
The elves do get like a +2.
It's a racial,
right?
I like the racial trait. That almost seems like oh yeah. Well, you elves walk on snow.
I know, right? Were they hilarious?
Yeah, but don't they lose something to their constitution, right? You have to give that up.
Yeah.
When you
if you walk on snow, can you walk on water? Water's more dense.
I mean, I was surprised everyone else just didn't let the 5 guys fight because I mean, a lot of the elves were dying in Helm's Deep, but Aragorn was.
That's why the story is about them. If it was about a bunch of guys that died,
it's an epic fantasy. I mean, of course he can't die, but I mean, just losing an arm or something shows some battle wound, and I mean, I
You're
could
on
just
the
see,
inside, right?
I could just see
PTSD.
veterans coming up with cut off arms and stuff, and just going to Aragorn and what are you, punk. You're a king now. You lose crap. Look at you.
Yeah.
Hop
Just
on
put a
his one
scratch.
leg. Yeah, I know.
Well,
He's
Aaron,
a
just to be fair and to clarify, the
Thread drift.
in the book, the elves did not come to help at Helm's Deep. The men had to fight that battle on their own, and a lot of hardcore Tolkien fans were like, "What? The elves showed up?" But it was dramatically satisfying for the screenplay, so everyone sort of went along with it. But honestly, the book is much more intense in terms of, I don't know how they're going to survive, because it's just men fighting this battle, right? And then, of course, Gandalf shows up at the end.
That series of books is so hard to get through because it's the weight of the universe. Just slowly
it can
descends
be
on you as you read this book. By the time you get to the last one, you are just you're right there with Frodo. You're beaten down, you're dirty, your fingernails are full of grit, and you're just ready to, just throw the damn ring in the fire. Let's get this over with.
Get rid of it.
That's the way the books are. It's just, it was very hard for me to read those books because they just beat you down.
Well, to me, I compared it very much to the Odyssey, the Iliad,
which is based on. I mean, he wrote them like that, especially
intentionally.
He was he was trying to create a
prehistoric mythology for Western Europe.
Exactly. And it's if you look at it in that way, he was pretty successful at it.
Yeah.
I mean, look how popular it is today.
Yeah, still to this day.
Give it a couple of hundred years, it may be looked on as a mythology. So,
I admit I tried to read Tolkien.
Too hard.
It is.
But give me Robert E. Howard.
Dense.
Oh yeah,
Robert E.
Howard.
Howard.
It's a bit of a slog.
Yeah,
it's a bit of a slog, but
the names slow you down. Like you're reading like big.
Who? What?
And then you've got Sauron, and then you've got Saruman, and
which took me forever to figure out. When I first saw the movie, I'm like, who's who? I'm like, I know, but it's it's part of the book. So
the books are like that too. And Boromir,
but you know what's
Faramir, and
the Bakshi version, they intentionally thought Saruman would sound too much like Sauron, and in portions of it, he calls him Eruman, and then calls him Saruman because they changed their mind again. It's very. And then you go back and read. It's very strange. He calls him Eruman. Good movie.
Was very odd. It was jarring.
Eruman,
common name.
You do this if you delay me.
That's pretty good.
Thank you. I've watched it about 5.
You are a voice actor in the making.
I know, really. It's good.
Who's the voice of Gandalf in the Rankin Bass Hobbit? Anybody?
Wasn't it the guy who played Saruman?
He's a famous director.
John Houseman.
John
Houston.
Very good.
Angelica Houston's dad. Yeah.
Very
John
good.
Houston.
Yep.
That's right. Yep.
Orson Bean is Bilbo. He's from he's been with lots of stuff, but I don't think he's related to Sean Bean or Bean.
Yeah.
Sean Bond.
He was the voice of Unicron in the Transformers movie.
Yes.
Was he really?
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
Do you know who the voice of Unicron was in the Transformers movie?
Unicorn?
Talk to me.
Well, wait. Who? That wasn't Leonard Nimoy, was it?
He was in there. He played another voice. It was his last performance.
War of the Worlds. Yeah, War of the Worlds.
Orson Welles.
Orson Welles.
Yep.
Orson Welles. Yes.
Yes.
Really?
It was his very last performance. And he had no idea what he was playing too. Yeah.
Well,
Leonard Nimoy played a voice in there too.
He was like, "Well, it's going to the trust."
So, Scott, how many rings were there? Just trivia question, real quick.
How many what?
How many rings?
How many rings?
Oh,
there were 9.
No.
Because it was
10.
More than that.
No, because it was 4 and 2 and
no.
There were 9 for men.
I'll help
there
you
were
out.
9 for men.
Long ago, in the early years of the Second Age,
That's good.
the great elven smiths forged rings of power.
He's reading this. It's not memorized.
For mortal men, 7 for the dwarf lords, 3 for the tall elf kings, and then the Sauron learned the craft of making the One Ring, right?
And so all of us just had visual mental images of the opening.
Yes,
of the animated. That was the animated.
Everybody
the Ring of Rings,
Bohemian Rhapsody,
know, right?
V's.
Yeah.
You know?
So but again, you've got that world and the ability to streamline that. I have my hats off to those poor screenwriters to go through this thing, right?
Yeah.
And you have to streamline.
Did you guys watch that Ring of Power series? I never watched it.
No, I haven't.
I haven't. Episodes, yeah.
Okay.
Lost.
Yeah, I don't know.
In the Wheel of Time. I've only
it's a famous book series.
Yeah,
I had a friend that was really into it, and she
from like the 90s, like all the way. When did it start? Like early 90s?
Oh, a long time ago. I got about half of them.
Yeah,
and they came out in such
too.
They
they
came out in such long intervals that by the time the next book would come out, I would have to go back and start at the beginning to write.
I just couldn't get it because I got a friend a little older than me, same thing. He got into them, and he would complain like, "It's been how many years since?" And then I was like, "I can't
I have to read it."
Yeah,
I'll tell you the series I'd really love to see either done into movie or comic book form, and that's Tad Williams' Dragon Bone Chair series.
Okay, Tad Williams. He does some.
Yes, I've read the first. Is that series the second book is one of them? I feel like is strikingly different than the first one, and I couldn't get into it. Maybe that's not what it.
Anything Tad Williams writes is really, really good.
I really like the Myth series by Robert Asprin. That was a series, but that was one of the series.
Yes,
I think that would actually make a good series because of the humor in it. I think that would.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Didn't he do Thieves World? Was that?
I think so. Yeah. I think that was his more popular series. I got into the Myth series more. That was more comedic take, and I could see that working well. As a modern day, because all the tongue-in-cheek humor in the book is already in the book, that I can see that working.
Well, okay, so I'm gonna throw a question out there for everybody to comment on. Why aren't some of these producers having comic companies do adaptations of Rings of Power, Game of Thrones, Wheel of Time? Why aren't there comic
I just don't think they sell. You know, it's funny that people used to. It's funny. I remember buying the Batman movie came out. They bought the Batman book, and it was like a prestige format.
Right.
Even you would think even that they want to use as promotional gimmicks, like free comics, but again,
that's not how it works. That's not how it works, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
Yeah, they want the comic company to pay them to do the adaptation.
Okay, so I have a story about a comic adaptation of a movie. So when I was working for Innovation,
those nights, man.
When I was
working for God, go on.
When I was working for Innovation, he purchased the rights or the license to do the comic book adaptation of Stephen King's Lawnmower Man.
Okay.
All right.
Doesn't
so
that seem kind of an weird oxymoron that the company's called Innovation and he bought the rights to another story?
Yes. So
it was a 60 page. The company started out as one thing and turned into
another, right? I guess so. Sorry.
I'm serious. That's what happened with Innovation. It was that way, but then he got Lost in Space. He got Quantum Leap,
and I worked on a lot. I worked on a lot of licensed product. So it was a 60-page graphic novel adaptation of the movie, not the book, but the movie. We got the entire thing done. It was my inks over Stuart Ramonen's pencils.
Wow, Stuart back then even. Wow.
Yeah, it was gorgeous. I mean, I'm talking gorgeous. It was all colored, lettered, ready to go to press, and Stephen King's lawyers killed it because he hated the movie adaptation. So when you're talking about adaptations of movie, you're not just talking about the movie. You're talking about everybody surrounding the book.
I was in talks with a writer friend of mine was in talks with Clive Cussler.
Okay.
The Dirk Pitt stories.
Yeah.
And he was a big fan of Clive Cussler's, and he was actually talking to Clive Cussler about this writer writing a series and having me draw it of Dirk.
Whoa.
That'd be awesome.
Dirk Pitt.
Dude, that would be awesome.
I did a few drawings, and we were still talking to him, and then his publicist came in and nixed the whole thing.
Yeah, see, you've got all these other people involved in these movies.
Killed it, and it just collapsed.
That's
you've got not only the movie company, but you've got the people who own the original rights to all these stories. You've got the movie rights. You've got this and that, and it's just incredibly complicated to get these things into comics. You've got to go through so many hoops.
That must
and
be
you got to
hard.
pay the licensing to this person and licensing to that person and a likeness and you know it's very complicated.
And every page that you draw has to go through, like,
Yep.
I have a great story about the stuff what I was doing for Star Trek, and I don't know if I've told this before here or not.
Tell it again.
I may have. I had one of the first books I did for DC was it had Captain Kirk and he was meeting Trelane again.
Okay.
And we sent the pages off, and I got back my share of the original art, and I'm going, all the heads were pasted over of Captain Kirk. And I'm going, what happened here? And apparently it had to go past William Shatner and other people at Paramount. And apparently they'd had some trouble with the likeness of William Shatner. So I curiously peeled one back just to see what the original looked like and what the new one looked like. And it was his hairline.
Great story. Great story.
That's awesome.
I've done Nightmare on Elm Street, Child's Play, Lost in Space, and several other ones. And it's always, it's a zoo. It's not worth the effort.
I did Star Wars and Knights of the Old Republic, and even though that's never become a hugely successful film, I had to go through those same hoops. Every page I did had to be approved by Lucasfilm.
Wow. Barbie was the same way.
I had to submit alien creatures that hadn't been on the show. If we did something that hadn't been on the show, we had to submit drawings of what they were supposed to look like. So and they wanted it to look like somebody had we couldn't do insects or anything weird like that, or anything that didn't have human anatomy with stuff stuck all over it.
Yeah.
So I finally got to the point where I didn't just submit one. I would submit
only 4 boobs,
3 or 4 designs for each alien creature.
How?
So what would they do? They'd say, well, we want aspects of this one and this one, and put those together to make it. So so it was constant stuff like that.
It's funny. I've always going to comics. I've always thought, and I've never understood about the fantasy comics. And I mean, again, I can't do this because I'm a man of one, but I've never understood. It seemed like an epic fantasy world would be ripe for a connected universe comic.
Yes.
Universe.
Yes.
And I'm surprised no one's ever done this.
I agree.
Because you have superheroes, take the same concept of superheroes. You can have like a comic book with the Ranger, comic book with the Elf.
Yeah.
And then you can have like them team up like the Avengers. And I don't see why anyone's never done this before.
And I would say you could make it linear. This is my feeling. I know there's problems with that in the superhero world. Give it a beginning and an end. I mean, you could write it for 10 years if you want, but have everybody go through time. And don't get confused with how long people are. Okay, they've been alive for 30 years, but they're only this old. I like your idea, and have everybody have the whole story world play out. I mean, it's kind of what Rory and I are trying to do with ours.
Absolutely.
We get into it. We can keep going, but
I think somebody attempted that whole. Now it wasn't bits and pieces. It was a comic called The Last Kingdom. Does anybody remember that? The Last Kingdom. I think
there's a book series called The Last Kingdom.
But it was a comic book series, and it went for years and years and years. But it was one huge storyline.
Yeah.
I never bought any of it, but I did see some art from it, but it was this huge epic story that this guy had created.
The guy
I'm sorry?
Lady Death did that a little bit. He connected a horror universe. I mean, he had like Evil Ernie, Lady Death, and there was like a few other characters he tried to do. It was popular for a time. Fantasies, it just seems like absolutely ripe for this idea.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And
if you took the template, Aaron, that you were talking about, the Tolkien-esque template, and you took those characters and you said, okay, we'll do a solo adventure for the dwarf, a solo adventure for the elf, a solo adventure for the ranger, but then they come together and have a book that has them together, like the Avengers, and then a book that has just Captain America. So you'd have a book with the Fellowship, but then a book with just Aragorn, a book with just Gimli, a book with just Legolas.
I think the Silverline creative world could do it. We'll make that plea out there. If you are a
Hey,
billionaire
Brent.
looking for
Hey,
what
Brent.
to do with your money, Mr. Powerball winner, whatever out there in California.
Mr. Powerball, you got.
I tried.
I know.
tried.
I know you were
Exactly right.
trying. Just a few million, and we can make this happen.
Yeah.
It was because I've often wondered, even with publishing companies, like would a company that publishes multiple titles be better at making a shared theme of their titles? Because so many independent comic companies come out and they have titles from all different genres, that they cover everything. But I've often wondered, what would it be if a company decided to we
Have a
have
shared
our
universe?
Yeah.
No,
And
interesting.
everything is shared in that shared universe, and that way they can market directly to their niche, fantasy, horror, whatnot.
Yeah.
Well, we have like
And-
3 or 4 of our books that share a universe.
Yeah, but I mean, like nothing else. I mean, like it's focused just on that. Like you don't like a shared universe and the other crap. No, I mean you really just focus on like if we're gonna.
That's
tell
the ground
fantasy-
rules. If you're going to
Yeah,
work for
the
that
nature-
company,
Right.
it's got to be in that shared universe.
Gotta be.
Marvel does that.
Rules,
DC, I mean,
limitations.
they've got to be part of the universe. I mean, they eventually throw everything in the kitchen sink in the universe, but
Well, of course they do,
yeah,
because that's what they do. Brent, welcome. Glad you're
Yeah.
here. You're coming in on the tail end of a long discussion about epic fantasy. For the purposes of this discussion, defined as the Tolkien-esque sort of dwarf, a mage, ranger, elf adventuring to solve a quest and so on. It doesn't have to be that, but just for the purposes of our discussion,
Must involve a lot of walking.
a lot of
Lots of
why
walking.
why my question, and
If
I
you
really
were a
love
class, what class would you be?
yeah, what class? No, my question really for you is, why hasn't any publisher decided to do a tie-in adaptation to Game of Thrones, a tie-in adaptation to Rings of Power, a tie-in adaptation to A Wheel of Time, and actually make a successful run of it as a comic book? Is it practical? Is it economic? Is it too many hoops to jump through, as we've touched on? What are your thoughts on that? Because it seems like a natural thing. In the past, when a Batman movie would come out, you'd wait and you'd get the comic adaptation of that Batman movie. So why not the equivalent for the epic fantasy movies? I'd love to get your take on some of that.
I know there's a Game of Thrones comic.
Okay.
I
I
didn't know that.
actually thumbed through one at my local comic shop before I knew anything about Game of Thrones. So I know they're out there. It probably does have to do with licensing, I guess. I mean,
It's a nightmare.
the new Lord of the Rings show, I think, had buy-in from Christopher Tolkien, but that they also had $1 billion to throw around.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I
Where's
think
that Powerball when we need it?
I know, right?
Yeah,
I
Gone.
bought them.
yeah. I did my part.
Oh,
Bought
I
mine too.
was totally. If we won, I was totally going to be a silent partner in Silverline and
Did
Pay
not
everybody.
give me the
Yes.
right ticket. Dang it.
I would do that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Calculus says Silverline kind of has the Image Founders styled shared universe. We do. A lot of our titles could conceivably cross over. So we appreciate that vote of
Yeah,
confidence. there.
even Twilight Grim could be a city somewhere else in the universe. Yeah.
Divinity and
absolutely.
cat and mouse
Definitely.
are made for each other.
They are made for each
Yeah.
other, and I still maintain Silverblade, if it ever comes out, maybe next year. Silverblade, because of the nature of the weaponry that appear in Silverblade and its timelessness, the weapons are passed throughout history. So it can take place now, it can take place in medieval times, it can even take place in alternate universes, especially Twilight Grim with the, situation with the vampires and so on and so forth. Speaking of shared universes and Silverline Kickstarter, we've got a Kickstarter going on right now, and it's it needs more backers, and
It's a big one.
it's the fantastic Fall Frenzy, and we really need you guys to go to Silverline.com and check out the Kickstarter and support it.
5. Count them. 5.
Five
comic books.
books.
And here's the thing. I want to interject here. People are going, I don't want 5 books. But you don't have to buy 5 books.
No,
you can buy
No, you don't.
you can buy 1 book, you can buy all 5 books. There's a $1 tier that will take you to an a la carte menu that just is add-ons.
Exactly.
You can buy the original art by itself.
I thought that was a great idea.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. So if you see a piece of original art, but you're not interested in any of the books, you can do that. Just go to the $1 tier. If you see one book that you want to support, you can totally do that and ignore the other. If you want a T-shirt, you can do that. It's just wide open. Don't feel like when you see it, it's like, oh God, 5 books. I don't want 5 books. We got it covered for you.
We got everything you want. We've got Switchblade, we've got Cape Town, we've got Divinity, we've got Trumps, and we got Pendulum. We've got 5 comics in 1 campaign. It literally, guys. I mean, if you want to support independent publishing, you want to support these unique ideas we're always talking about. You want to support a universe. Silverline.
You sound like public television.
Hey, it's that time of year, folks. Let's go.
Yeah.
I know
We
Jerry
need those
Lewis,
pledges.
but hey, I can tell something.
You don't like it when we do it, and we don't like doing it either.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what makes it happen. Is
Yeah.
we're only here as long as you guys want us to be here.
Right.
We love doing the work, but support always helps it grow.
And what's cool about, first of all, supporting indies is you get the little extras. You get this time here, and we reveal tidbits about our stories and so forth that you wouldn't get elsewhere. But supporting the Kickstarter campaign, we make a point of giving you things that you can only get at that time. You're not going to find this stuff later on. It's what's that?
Giveaways. There's
made by
all kinds of
readers
stuff.
like you. Yes.
Contributions to these comics are made by readers like you.
Our
That was
campaigns,
PBS enough for you.
Our campaigns are half the point. I mean, the stories are done; they're ready to go. There's no speculation. You're getting the story when you back it, but you have the opportunity to get the extras, and you won't get that from any of the big guys, and so even some of the bigger indies. You don't have this level of involvement. So go.
Every Kickstarter that we have as a success gets us one step closer to being in your retailer store.
Yeah.
So every successful Kickstarter gets us
that much closer. Yes, indeed. The brand new title, Cape Town, by Brent T. Larson. T stands for Tiberius. Some would say.
I will also say that all of the Silverline bookmarks that I've gotten as add-ons from the campaigns actually help me to read more regular books.
Yeah. Very good. See, there's all this ancillary benefit that we get from supporting Kickstarters. But no, in all seriousness, guys, go to the Kickstarter, put in Silverline Comics. Give us some love there, and we will continue to send out creative ideas that are independent, that aren't controlled heavily by editorial. I mean, Roland just says, y'all do something cool. I mean, literally, he has not guided me in any way, even the covers I do for other than referencing the material and getting it right.
That's usually why you're still incomprehensible.
Well, absolutely.
Everything I write, everything he says, that's dumb, and then he rewrites it. That's
how it happens.
Weird.
That's a good idea,
but it's certainly something.
It's highlighting in Sharpie.
It's got words in it, I guess. Some pictures.
There's some pictures, some words.
I always hear a shredder going
But when he looks at Aaron, when he talks to you, does he always do the face palm and rub his eyebrows?
No,
like this?
Roland is that.
I think it's just
meme
looking upon me. I mean, when you look upon me, you can't help
he's averting his eyes. The brilliance there.
The brilliance, the stare,
as it would be. So, guys, what do we think here? After all this discussion, what conclusion have we come to? Why don't Epic Comics sell, Scott?
I don't know. I feel like there's a lot that's expected from them, and they got to be really good, and they have to maintain a goodness for a long time, and they have to be quality. And I'm not saying comic books aren't quality. I feel like, though, a lot of times, and people have the perception that they get dumbed down, and then so they're going from high fantasy Tolkien or on par with that, and they're going to get distilled, and they don't want to spend their time on it. So I really feel like, and I think all comics, but Usagi Yojimbo, the art is really simple, but it's a really good story, really good. And but that, and I don't know, did that take a long time catch on. I really don't know about that. The background.
I don't know. Well,
I'm
he
just
hit
familiar-
he hit during the Ninja Turtle phase.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that
but
was
I feel like it has to be really, really good. And I know that sounds dumb, but we can have stories that are fun, pulp, page turners.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
But I feel like something about the fantasy world, people
The
want it
writing
to
has
be
to be stellar.
just
The
really
writing.
good and
It's got to be
consistently
literary, yeah.
Rory, what about you?
Yeah, I think times are tough and people don't have as much money as they need to, and I think they want more bang for their buck. So a graphic novel with quality printing, quality hardcover, a full story together that I could sit down and read the whole darn thing and feel satiated.
Okay, all right,
That's
good quality story. Rob, what about you? Why don't Epic Comics sell?
I think they do. Sandman is a good example of it. It does.
Okay.
But why don't we have more? I think is even better question.
Okay.
And I think everything that everyone said so far is absolutely true. I think what's going to have to happen is what happened with Sandman. You have to have a creator with a singular idea that has a singular voice that he uses in writing or drawing or whatever with the character, and it has to. It's like, how do you capture lightning in a jar? Sherlock Holmes was just
Bigger
a creation that Conan Doyle came up with. He had no intentions of him doing much more with him than making a few bucks with him and then moving on to do the stuff that he wanted to do. And he ended up creating an iconic character. How does that happen? Well, you have to have all those ingredients that you cannot possibly think about ahead of time and say, this is what it's going to take to make this. It has to be it. And it also has to happen at the right time, with the right story, with the audience is primed properly for it. And it's lightning in a bottle. You can't necessarily capture it, but that's what it's going to take.
I think that's
Robbie,
brilliant. You've made my point.
Sacrifice small children to get your career. I mean, that's how you were making the right time.
If that
to
works
get
for
into
you,
If that definitely works for Aaron.
I can't help you.
I want to say something, Rob. I think you made the point.
You can't give me some small kids a second.
I think
No,
to move to another country.
I'm sorry, you can't have my granddaughter.
Rob, I think you made the point that's the tagline for the show. It's beyond calculation, it's beyond politics, and it's beyond the big two. We've got to go beyond what's expected to achieve what we're looking for.
Somebody's got to have the light bulb goes above somebody's head. It's either an artist or a writer or both of them together in the same human being to create something like that.
Unless you get noticed by just that right person, you got to have the budget for it too.
That's what I was going to say.
Not necessarily.
Not always. But for me, if I wanted to do that, I can't afford an artist. I can't afford to pay somebody unless somehow I can convince them. Or the publisher picks us up. But unless like your Ninja Turtles or
somebody like me,
we had 11, 12 years of
who already has an income that keeps him alive and he doesn't have to worry about making his income from drawing the comic book or whatever. And you find somebody like that who can do it for you. That's essentially what I'm doing with Ron Porter on the Boston Bombers. No, that's why I'm going to this next thing. That's why I'm working with Ron Porter on his Boston Bombers book. I'm not making a dime on this thing. I'm spending money on Bristol board and everything, but it's because I believe in the story. I think he's got a hero story going on here with this thing. I think this is a great idea. If you can, it's all about a lot of it's luck. It really is. When I say that, what I mean by luck is it means when preparation meets opportunity.
Yeah.
And they don't always meet. Sometimes they pass in the night and they don't touch. But that's what luck is when you're prepared for when that opportunity comes.
I think you just described Aaron's love life. Barb,
it's working for him, and he's not making animal or little child sacrifices, I think that's okay.
We don't get into what makes Aaron success.
I know
So,
there's a
Aaron,
lot of kids in your neighborhood, Rob.
I'm so glad you don't know where I live.
So, Aaron, when you get to put a ring on
Barb, you had something actually edifying to say without these yahoos jammering all night. Go ahead.
We're taking up too much bandwidth.
Come on, Center Square.
It's going to require a fresh take on a tired old theme. And it's going to take a unique perspective of a good writer, some good art, and getting it into the hands of reviewers.
Yeah.
People who will write about and say, this is the best thing I've read in, ages. You guys need to read it. Getting it into the right hands.
Actually, word of mouth.
Getting it into the right hands to promote it is essential. But it's got to be a fresh take, because as we pointed out very early in the show, we can only have so many dwarves with axes.
Yeah, good point. Aaron, your
I'll make it then. If you want a fresh take on fantasy, my Gollings book is probably the freshest take you're gonna get.
Wow.
So
hey,
time to write a review.
Transition to self-promotion. Is that what?
I don't know how many of you guys have read the whole thing.
Hey,
yet.
I mentioned Boston Bombers, so it's fair
that's
game.
an okay thing. No, it's totally fair to.
Can I toss in this weekend? If you're anywhere near the southern tier, the Pennsylvania border of New York and Pennsylvania, Twin Tiers Comic Con Saturday and Sunday, I will be there. Repping Silverline. I'll have Steam Patriots and other Silverline titles, Twin Tiers, and Horseheads. And if you want to look up some Revolutionary War history, why is the town called Horseheads?
Aaron would know the answer to that.
Because Sullivan campaign
all the time.
As long as we're self-hyping, Divinity #3 is on this Kickstarter, and Divinity.
Go there.
I've heard people come up to me at the last few shows and said, "I love Divinity. When's #3 going on? Going to come out?"
You said,
"Actually,
it's at the Kickstarter now."
Here's a flyer.
Since we're self-hyping, I'm a pretty decent person.
Rory is. I'm going to say, folks, if you're out there and you see Rory, give him a hug. All right, he's a great guy. All right,
okay.
Keep a hand over your pocket.
Rob's a pretty good artist.
Did that just happen tonight? I mean,
that's awesome. You see that?
That's cool.
This man.
Hey, folks, click at the beginning of the stream and then slide to this moment.
That's
so
how
if you're looking for hot, sexy ladies on the internet, Rob's got the connection.
Rob knows
right
how to
now.
Do anything.
With the right
Face
price.
it, Tiger. You just hit the jackpot. Calculus says losing money for the art is a pain, but it is beautiful. That's you know what? That's poetic.
Bittersweet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel you, man. I feel you. Brent, your thoughts.
Okay, the question was
not all of them,
why
do you have a new background?
Where are the sticky notes?
I'm on vacation.
Awesome.
So, are you on vacation in Florida?
Yeah, it's true.
Okay.
There's a hurricane.
Oh my God!
There's a hurricane there.
Yeah.
I hope you're tied down.
Be careful. Be careful now. No, Brent, just very quickly, your thoughts on what's it going to take for a successful epic fantasy comic within the parameters that we discussed for most of the show to make it.
Like 15 words.
Okay. I don't think you can do it.
Okay.
I think all the big properties that are popular come from novels. And the cool thing about a novel is you can build a world from the ground up using as many words as you want, and people love it. But comics are 22 pages long, and you're going to have to describe a whole new, not only a world, but how money works, where people live, what they look like, the different races, is there magic, are axes the only thing they've got, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean,
sure.
I love the comics that I write because I don't have to explain all that to people. My heroes live in apartments. I don't have to explain what an apartment is.
Cool.
They wear masks and nobody questions. Why do yes, okay, there's a question. Why do superheroes wear masks? But I can explain it in a way that it makes sense in the world. But when you're talking fantasy, you have to build all of that, and you have to do it in the space of a really truncated period in space. It's just really hard to do.
Yeah.
It takes inspiration though. Again,
it does.
And there's part of that. Yeah.
I'll backpedal. I think it can be done. I just don't know how to do it. That's why I run.
I like that. I like that, Brandon. I like that. Total honesty. I love it. Guys, we've come to the end of another wonderful Silverliner Wednesday WAM broadcast, and I appreciate everyone's input. Y'all did great, and we always like to close with our motto as we say goodnight. We like to say, make mine Silverline.
Hey, I'm Pat Broderick. Make mine Silverline.